Today I'm driving from the German city of Karlsruhe to Lake Garda in Italy. The trip is approximately 650 kilometers one way. The tank on this car is 63 liters, and so that would be approximately a little under 10 liters per 100 kilometers in terms of fuel efficiency, which is quite doable. But I'm going to try to absolutely minimize my fuel consumption without driving slower than the speed of traffic and without cruise control. I'm completely certain about exceeding this target, but I do not know exactly by how much, and that's the point of this video. Let's see what we can get. So what's the car's rated efficiency? This data is from the early 2000s when this car was released. So in a city, the fuel consumption is rated at 12.2 liters per 100 kilometers, and on country roads, 6.9 liters per 100 kilometers, which I think is quite punchy. I'm not sure if that's really that doable. And the highway efficiency is stated at 10.3 liters per 100 kilometers. So that's a bit more than what we want to get. Although the estimated range of the vehicle is put at 660 kilometers with a 63 liter tank. So that is very much within our capacity today. Now, the efficiency I typically experience is more on the lines of 12 liters per 100 kilometers in a city, which is unfortunately my daily efficiency as I only drive to work and back within the city. However, I experience something closer to 13 liters per 100 kilometers if I purely drive on a really short work commute with a lot of lights and a lot of stop-start. On longer highway trips, I quite easily manage 8.5 liters per 100 kilometers, as I tend to naturally always keep my accelerations in check and I try my best to drive with constant input. Now, some background on the car. This is a 2004 E46 facelift 320i in the limousine or sedan variant. The car is also bone stock. The engine on this is a 2.2 liter inline 6-cylinder that puts out roughly 170 horsepower and 210 newton meters. But that was back in 2004. I don't know what this puts out right now. This car has done 181,000 kilometers, and yeah, that's quite a bit. The engine is paired with a 5-speed manual gearbox, which is fantastic except for the fact that this car really needs a 6th gear on highways. I think it might have been possible to get significantly improved results in this test if it had had that. The larger displacement engine on the E46 models do come with that, so the 325i, the 328, the 330i, they all have got the 6th gear, and as you can see, I sit at 3500 RPM at cruising speed, which is really not ideal. Max torque, however, is achieved at exactly 3500 RPM, so at least this car isn't sluggish when overtaken. Now, this car is running the 205/55 R16 tires, inflated to 2.1 bar in the front and 2.5 in the rear. In terms of fuel, we're running Super 95 petrol. That's a standard fuel option in Germany and most of Europe. It's an octane rating of 95, and I only fill the E5 variant, so the 5% of ethanol, and not the E10, which is less efficient. Now, potential problems that we're going to hit on this drive. This stretch involves drastic elevation changes as we're going through the Swiss Alps to get to Italy. I'm also going to be using air conditioning because it's summer and I do not want to sweat for the sake of a bit more efficiency. And there's a lot of stop-start traffic because everyone seems to want to drive to Italy in summer. Another problem is the potential number of stops. So the more times you stop, the more efficiency you lose because you have to accelerate and then decelerate, and you have lost there. Now, what are my strategies to save fuel? So, I constantly monitor the fuel consumption gauge. It's probably my favorite gauge in the instrument cluster. Speed to me is secondary. I'm watching the fuel consumption and I'll adjust the speed accordingly. 120 kilometers per hour is the ideal speed in terms of the best compromise between efficiency and not being a snail on the highway. Naturally, slower would be even better for efficiency due to the relatively high RPM in 5th gear, but I don't consider this worth it. I don't want to be a hindrance to other drivers, and I also don't want to take an eternity to reach my destination. I'm going to do 140 on certain stretches with a mild descent. The speed is really not one of my target variables, it's the fuel efficiency. However, if I do need to accelerate, I will keep my max instantaneous acceleration at less than 14 liters per 100 kilometers. So I'm speaking again in terms of the fuel efficiency while accelerating. Switching lanes instead of braking when it's safe is what I'm going to do. Now, keep in mind when it's safe, when there's no traffic and when you're not going to surprise anyone. I think that's a good option to not waste energy. I'm not going to accelerate hard, that's kind of obvious. I'm not going to do unnecessary rev matching, although I do love rev matching and I will do it occasionally, but not through all the gears. So I will skip through gears when coming to a stop. So that's a little bit more brakes than engine braking, but we're going to do that for the sake of efficiency. And I'll lift off the throttle as early as possible without hindering traffic. If there's a light far ahead, I'm going to lift off and then change to the slowest lane and come to a slow stop. And in terms of hills, I'm not going to accelerate in order to keep the exact same speed when I'm climbing a hill, just like cruise control would. I'm not going to do that because that really dumps fuel. I'm going to stay at slower speeds behind trucks on uphill sections. And on downhill sections, I'm going to take advantage of deer gravity in order to keep my speed high and my fuel consumption low. Another important factor is the use of the air conditioner. I will be using the air conditioning because it is hot, it is summer, and we are headed to Italy. I do not want to sweat for the sake of this, so I'm going to periodically turn it on and off to eke out a little bit more efficiency than having it on constantly. Now here's the quick list of things that I am not going to do, and why not. So I'm not going to slowly accelerate on the on-ramps to highways. I'm also not going to overtake like a snail. I'm going to overtake normally and briskly. I'm not going to slowly accelerate to the speed limit after sections of traffic, which really increases traffic behind you and slows down everybody. I'm not going to turn off the engine at lights, and I'm not sitting behind trucks at 80 to 90 kilometers per hour. I'm essentially not going to drive like a snail. And I'm also not going to avoid overtaking. I really want to drive normally, but still efficiently. That's the goal here. So I'm not going to coast in neutral or do any of those sort of things. And the important thing is I'm not using cruise control. Now, this might seem counterintuitive, but here's my explanation. I absolutely hate cruise control, so that's why I'm not using it. I prefer trying to optimize it manually by constantly monitoring the fuel consumption gauge. I frankly think I might be better at eking out efficiency than cruise control. Cruise control in these cars is not adaptive and therefore does not allow you to go slower or faster than the limit set. That is practically silly when you don't take advantage of higher speeds in regions of lower resistance like downhill sections. And it really dumps fuel trying to maintain the exact same speed on uphill sections. And on uphill sections, well, there's trucks that slow down, they can't keep the same pace, and also visibility in terms of long range visibility that's reduced, and so naturally everyone drives more cautiously and slower, so it makes more sense to do that. Also, regardless of the efficiency discussion, I despise removing elements of my involvement as a driver. I don't want the car to drive itself. I'm an enthusiast. The destination to me is half as important as the drive. I have no problems with depressing the accelerator pedal at a set height for about 6 hours at a stretch. That's something you're going to have to ask me again in 10 years. Okay, so now for the results of the experiment. We are finally at Lake Garda. This is not the exact place, but we got to our hotel and the results are in. 660 kilometers driven, and we've got approximately a quarter tank remaining. That is absolutely insane. 660 kilometers is the entire estimated tank range, and we've got little under a quarter tank left, so that potentially stretches us up to 850, 870, maybe 900 kilometers of estimated range on a single 63 liters. I'm very impressed by this result. I didn't think we could overshoot the target by this much. What's super fascinating to me is the fact that we achieved this despite the fact that there was a ton of stop-start traffic at the Swiss border. So at the Alps, there's a ton of traffic there, and we were basically stuck in that for about 40 minutes, and that's an incline and so inefficient. I really thought we'd drop a lot of range there, and I think we did. So potentially this is 900 plus without traffic. We also stopped 2 times on the way, so there's that as well. So overall, I'm really extremely pleased to report that these techniques have worked out, and it's really extended the range of the vehicle. And I'm officially better than cruise control, although we don't have a control test with cruise control. So that's me just crowning myself king. You got to go with it. Sorry. So I do wonder what kind of efficiency is possible in this car with a 6-speed manual in it. So at cruising speed, lower RPMs on the highway, something at like 2,500 RPM, that would have been splendid instead of doing 3,500 RPM. But yeah, naturally with transient conditions like needing to overtake and needing to quickly change speed, it would have to dump a lot more fuel because it's not in the torque band, and that would actually lead to less economy. But yeah, in terms of this particular test, holding a really constant speed as far as possible, there should be considerable gains, something in the order of 15% more efficiency maybe. And as you can see, on the way back, I took a different route, didn't exactly drive the straight way back, did a lot of stops, so didn't bother measuring the efficiency. And apart from that, it was absolutely inclement weather, and yeah, terrible speeds, terrible efficiency, a lot of start-stop. So that's pretty much the end of this video. Cheers.